Stress and flow states are closely tied together. And in the last video, we were talking about how it's important to slow down to avoid that burnout, how important it is, to really find balance in your schedule on a regular basis to keep moving forward with your peak performance. And in this video, we're talking more about that relationship between stress and flow. So let's get right into it. We've been talking about how to get out of a funk because I'm seeing a lot of people are struggling right now, myself included, with some of that overwhelmed sense, kind of reaching that point of burnout where whether it's creative aspects or any type of sports performance, everybody's really struggling to keep performing at a high level, it seems. And so when you get into a funk like that, part of it is catching those signals ahead of time, being aware enough to slow down when you need to, and also understanding that balance point with stress when it comes to performing, and particularly with flow states, how stress is an important aspect of that, but you need to find that right sweet spot in order to not, face boredom or lower levels of performance, or also on the other end, being overwhelmed and stimulated to the point of stress and burnout. So stress surrounds the flow state and peak performance from all angles, basically. We need to find the perfect balance between our skill level and the challenge in order to avoid states of too much anxiety or too much boredom when it comes to that flow channel. And it turns out, stress is an important component of that. From a neurochemical perspective, our bodies are in a stress state when we're trying to struggle into the flow state. There's a release of adrenaline or norepinephrine, and before we hit that spot where dopamine releases and endorphins release, where we start to feel good, we are in a struggle against those hormones that are also related to stress. So I know stress can tend to be a buzzword for a lot of people, and think of it more about the amount of stimulation that is going on around you. And particularly when it comes to an important concept with stressors is what's known as the allostatic load. So basically, everything in our life can contribute to stress or combating against it, as I talked about in the last video in this series about finding balance, and also in the video on active recovery, where we talk about some of the strategies that can be used in order to get back to baseline quicker. But when it comes to the allostatic load, basically there are a bunch of different factors in our lives that can contribute stress. And depending on what's going on in your life at the moment, these different aspects are going to add or take away from our stress to different degrees. And so there's actually a really great wheel of stress diagram that I'm going to link in the description so that you can become a little more aware of the different areas of our lives that lead to stress or add to the stress on our system overall as part of this allostatic load. Becoming aware of these different stressors in our lives is an important way to eliminate that sense of overwhelm when you have too much on your plate and it starts to stack up. And this is especially important when it is in terms of peak performance and whatever we want to do our best at or find flow with, because we need to have our system in check and in balance before we can maximize our performance as much as possible. And whether you like it or not, our bodies can't keep performing at a peak level long term indefinitely if we don't have balance in these other areas of our lives. If we keep pushing forward or assume that we can just constantly grind, eventually things are going to, crash and burn out. And we see it with a lot of creators who keep on pushing the bar higher and higher until they start to run out of creative ideas that feel exciting to them. They lose some of that passion. Or the same thing happens with sports when your body starts to get beat up too much and you can't keep pushing yourself to the limits that you want to. If you haven't included enough of that recovery time, or your body is facing too much stress, your mind's not also going to be able to flow with it because you're in too much discomfort, or your system's just already pushing as much as it can handle and you can't keep on going any further. So when we reach a point like this, we need to slow down and take stock of what's going on in our life as a whole in order to basically get to one of two different directions in how we are going to handle things moving forward in order to mitigate some of the stressors if we're going to stress our body with our peak performance or our choice of flow activities. The first option is you'll have to back off on your primary flow activity and do it less intensely or less frequently if you are going to keep everything else in balance, or if you realize you're becoming more aware that your life circumstances can't handle the volume or the intensity and frequency of your primary flow activity as you're trying to incorporate it. And then the other option is if you do want to keep moving full force in the direction or with whatever sport or activity you are trying to, master, perform your very best at, and you want to keep going at the max level, you simply need to learn how to mitigate some of the stressors in other areas or maximize your active recovery time in order to balance everything out and keep moving forward. And this, of course, may come with having to get back into reevaluating on a more frequent basis, or using some objective measurement tools like an Oura ring or Whoop band that's going to look at HRV and other measurements of how prepared your body is on a regular basis, so that you can make those in the moment decisions when you need to about when to back off or include more active recovery versus when you can push at your absolute most on any given day. And how will you know when you reach this breaking point? I think we've all come to that point in our lives where the sun just goes out of whatever activities that we typically are most passionate about. And it's been showing up more and more in the last 18 months or the last couple of years as we've had this global stress on our systems that's impacting everybody. It's impacting the relationships around us, it's impacting our mental health, and it's impacting our ability in a lot of ways to perform at our very best in different activities. So with that in mind, we do have to keep in check and take note when things need to be backed off on a little bit more, especially if you don't want to keep repeating the pattern and fall back into states of overwhelm and burnout. You've got to learn how to develop more of this awareness around your performance limits and handling the stressors in your life. And so in the next video in this series, we're going to go more into what you can actually do when you do go over the edge and put yourself into that state of feeling overwhelmed or reaching burnout, or when you can't perform at your very best and you've fallen into a funk. We're going to talk more about how to get out of that state. And so, as I mentioned earlier, check out that wheel of stress diagram and take notes. Start to develop more awareness around the different areas of your life that are leading to stress. You can actually complete the chart that's included, and it will help to show you what areas are contributing most to stress in your life right now. It's a great activity to do, on a monthly basis or every couple of months, to take note of what's changed in your life. Be sure to check out the video on the importance of slowing down for peak performance, which was the first video in this series. And until the next one, dream on and find your flow.